Good morning, everyone. Great to be here. I'm Mahesh Ramanujam. I'm the president and CEO of the Global Network for Zero. The Global Network for Zero is a net zero certification organization for buildings, portfolios, and business enterprises that I co-founded with Sarah Merricks and Scott Hurst in late 2022. So you can learn more about us by visiting globalnetworkforzero.com, where you can read more about our certification systems and network insights, review case studies on net zero certified projects, and be introduced to our global team, advisors, and partners. Our certification system is based on the greenhouse gas protocol and focuses on scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, is rating system agnostic, has no prerequisites, and is recognized by GRESB. So I want to welcome today both old and new friends who are joining us for our first US-focused webinar. Inside the net zero movement, insights from our industry leaders in the US. Our conversation this afternoon will be guided by some of the top sustainability experts across the AEC industry who have spent their careers on the front lines fighting for elevating sustainable design standards and codes, and of course, one of the most critical topics at hand, decarbonization. So today's discussion topics are important because one of the most critical things we can do as a community focused on decarbonization is to become more harmonized. If the green building community is fragmented, then the net zero community is even more so. So in the US market, we need to be singularly focused on implementation and know how our fellow practitioners are overcoming the challenges in front of them. We need to understand all the tools that are available to us and work to support each other just as we did in the early days of a green building. And that's because great implementation equals great certification. And great certification means a validation of all of our collective efforts. So I am proud to be here with these leaders today because it takes a lot to plant a flag in a movement, particularly early on, when not everyone understands what you're doing or why you want to do it in the first place. It takes a lot to be that person or that organization who offers itself up as a catalyst to change. But the change to a net zero and regenerative world is coming, and it is coming fast. And we need to move collectively with a sense of urgency. We have all heard many 2030 and 2050 deadlines that both motivate us and also keep us up at night. I want to cite one that demonstrates not only the work that we must do, but the business case about why we have and should do it. So recently, a research paper from JLL showed that the demand for high quality and low carbon commercial office space will outstrip supply by 75% across US markets by 2030, equating to a stunning project shortage of 57 million square feet of low carbon office space. The New York City market by itself provides a telling example of what's to come. The same JLL report noted that across the leased footprint of the top 100 occupiers of the city, 72% of upcoming requirements are tied to a carbon commitment this decade, amounting to 23.3 million square feet of future demand. The study showed the current development pipeline only delivering 8.1 million square feet. So my friends, we have work to do. We have, as they say, good trouble to make. I hope that today we can put some of the real challenges to achieving our goals on the table and not be afraid to define the work in the trenches that needs to happen so that we can bring greater collective efficiencies to our work and demonstrate to the AEC community at large the speed and scale that we need to do this work and to achieve an authentically net zero regenerative world. So I love conversations like this today because it brings clarity and purpose and help us to remain focused on the signal of our work and not the noise that is attempting to distract us from it. And with that, I would like to get started with our first panel, Evolving the Industry, how AEC leaders are shaping the net zero future. A discussion about how these leaders are navigating the technical, operational, and cultural shifts needed to transition both new and existing buildings toward net zero GHG emissions, and what will it take for the broader industry to rise to the challenge. So without any further ado, we will dive in, and Marshall, we will get started with you. Always my favorite question with you, the discussion that we always have about, which is that today the market is facing high inflation, high interest rates, tariff uncertainty, struggling middle class, and so many issues that we are facing in America. Do you think sustainability is still a priority? And if it is, how are you going to price it And how are you making the business case?
Thank you, Mahesh. Thank you for the introduction, and it's an honor to be here with you. You are our leader, and a lot of us in this industry, especially in the U.S., we can say, have taken our positions because of your leadership. And that's a good question, because when you presented this to me years ago, I don't want to age us here, but when you gave us the idea to be net zero, we looked at each other, myself and Gary, who is my energy partner. He looked at me, net zero? What the hell is he talking about? But what we've been able to do is it's all about staying committed to the program. Certainly this government has made things even harder. There was ITC tax credits. There were certain tax credits that we all know that have gone away. But how do we continue to do this? From our perspective, in Florida, which we're really challenged from resiliency and sustainability, we just have no choice. So we made the commitment regardless if there was tax credits or there were not tax credits. Mm-hmm. We decided that we had to build a home that would have no carbon footprint, which our HERS rating on our homes is -13. It's an average between -16 and -13 for HERS rating, which means that our homes essentially have no carbon footprint, but a positive one. And as we look towards the future, and unfortunately with this current government, federal government, they're doing nothing to motivate anybody to do this. But we have to stay strong. And we have interest rate challenges, we have mortgage rate challenges. We're in the, unfortunately in our sector that we're talking about, our Hunters Point project, that's in a retail environment. As we move forward, which we have a new community coming up of 720 single family rentals, which will still offer that sustainable component, but you will be able to rent them. So there will be no huge barrier to entry. So we have to, be like chameleons, for lack of a better word, as we enter this market and we say, well, how do we really want to continue sustainability, continue with the commitment that we've made? And you have to, and if interest rates are not going to change, and if the government is not going to change and go back to the added value of offering the incentives, which weren't material in the first place, but it's still better than nothing. I think what we've committed to do is somehow find a way for the average American to experience net zero living. And even when we have, like, for example, we often, some of our homeowners rent out their homes to experience what net zero is. And we get 5-star reports, because in Florida, when it rains heavy, the power goes out. And that talks to the resiliency of our homes, is the fact that the sun and battery that we have, no matter what, as soon as the grid goes off, the power connects. So it's seamless. There's absolutely there's no buttons to press. There's no running around looking for a Tesla Powerwall that you got to turn on. So, the challenge as a developer is to stay on course. And that comes from leaders like you, Mahesh, that we will never disappoint. But you have to be a chameleon. You have to be able to adapt to the current market. And we are in a position in Florida where we're right on the water, and 80% of the homes or more were completely destroyed during the last 4 hurricanes we've had in 2 years. And some of them aren't even rebuilding. Yet we're standing strong, and we've had really good sales over the past 9 months, which has shocked me, because in 24 it was pretty tough. We were running into those questions, Mahesh, that you brought up, is how do we stay competitive in a market that is taxing you the opposite way, and you're adding such value on your homes? We're staying strong. We are committed to the length of this project. We're fortunate to be debt-free on our land. And I think that's really important. If you go in, because, lenders are talking, like we have lenders in our area that are, net zero bank, whatever they were called, and I go to them, and there's really no difference. It's a bit of marketing, and I'm saying to the president, like, I want more. Really give us more for being net zero. Give us more for being sustainable, instead of just like, well, it's a great brand and you're a net zero bank, you should be with a net zero bank. My advice to people is stay the course, because when you see your utility bills, literally, I talked to, my father lives in Rancho Mirage, California, in a similar size home, and he pays $900 a month in utilities. $900 a month. And we're paying, FP&L has a minimum of a $30, overcharge for nothing. So our homeowners will pay $35, $40 a month on an average for the whole 12-month period. And that's without FP&L monetizing the fact that we could take the power at 2 a.m. at 2 cents a kilowatt. So there's a lot of growth. We're reaching out to the government, our local representatives, and to the governor, who has been very positive about it in meetings, but nothing has happened. So I really believe that the key is to stay the course, and the key is to make sure that you've really developed your carbon footprint, and you've got the third-party ResNet and Energy Star and all the certifications and the global net zero. All of these certifications matter when a homeowner comes to take a look and they see that there's a delta of difference from what an average home is, where in Florida, some people, well, you really want windows? How many windows do you want? That was the old story. And now we're giving them a home that is completely the tightest, most, as an example, the Manatee County had to change the code because we failed our blow door inspections because we came in below the standard. Our homes are so tight. And this all goes back to the research and development that you have to do on these homes to make them perform. I'm not sure how much more time you want me to talk, Sarah. Do you want to?
No, we'd love to hear you all day, but we will move on. But the most important thing is, Marshall, I always believed that from the day when I met you, almost now a decade, is that I was impressed by your all neighborhood LEED Platinum homes, particularly for the senior housing. And second thing is that when I put on the challenge of, let's do a first single family net zero home, and you just said yes, and we made it happen together. So I love your leadership, and I only wish every single day that the residential market will pay attention to you. And I think we can flip the switch on the residential market in the US. If everybody would listen to you and just say, let's do it. If they just do it, you already have the playbook to do it. So we will stay the course. And I'm glad you are staying the course. It's fabulous. So thank you so much for the great head start for this particular conversation. So I will move on to Kajal. Kajal, thank you so much. Good to see you again. From your perspective as Director of Sustainable Design at LMN, what is your biggest barrier to getting clients from making the leap from what I would call sustainable design standards to net zero design standards, if there is a difference? And how do you still make the case when you have that resistance, which we all have? And do you have any case studies or anecdotes where you've been able to make a breakthrough? Tell us something about how you have been able to create the shift.
Yeah, thanks. Great question, or series of questions. It's really with just a can-do attitude. If you think, all right, we'll figure this out, we'll figure out how to do energy efficiency, et cetera. That's the secret sauce that we've been using. So first off, I guess, what do we mean by net zero? We wrote a Path to Zero Carbon series where we deeply researched what does it mean. And short story, it's not possible today to get to net zero on a comprehensive, is a building carbon neutral or something like that. Nonetheless, we learned a lot from that. And when we talk about net zero with our clients, usually it involves three things: energy efficiency, electrification, and 100% renewable energy. And then often it involves significant embodied carbon reductions as well as a fourth piece. So, energy efficiency, first one, everybody likes energy efficiency. It's conservation. How can you argue against something being more efficient? Energy codes are the biggest driver in energy efficiency that we've seen. And I work on the Building Code Council in the state of Washington, leading the energy code development. That's the biggest piece. But once you have a project in a site, it's about using early energy modeling to get additional cost-effective energy savings. And if we use early energy modeling and talk to our cost modelers, et cetera, we will get additional energy efficiency beyond the code on every project. And sometimes it's 10% beyond code, sometimes it's 50% beyond code. Part two is electrification. Using air source heat pumps and ground source heat pumps are great. And we've done projects all over the country that use air source heat pumps and ground source heat pumps. Campus projects in Utah, Washington, Illinois, other places. They're so efficient, and they tend to prioritize long-term cost savings, which a lot of our clients are into. So the barriers here are for electrification are that some of the electrification technologies cost more first cost. We will often find the long-term savings in there. And often by using a good window to wall ratio, by starting with great architectural design, we reduce the size of the mechanical system, which inherently reduces the cost of any more expensive mechanical system that gets us closer to net zero. And the last piece is 100% renewable energy. And solar is right now the cheapest form of energy ever invented, period. There's no question about that. So when our clients look out at how they're going to power their buildings, they find sometimes that buying a large solar farm or investing in a large solar farm is actually cheaper than just paying their power bill every month when they invest in it over a 15-year period, for example. And then you look at Florida and Texas, two of the top 3 states for solar installations last year. They're not doing it necessarily for altruism. They're doing it because it's the cheapest form of energy. And Texas is number 1 for solar batteries and wind last year. So those 3 things, energy efficiency, electrification, and renewable energy, will get us there. And then we could talk about embodied carbon more, but I know we have other questions to ask.
Correct. Did you have any recent breakthroughs where you were able to shift a client's mindset? Or all your clients are well informed, are willing to go the course?
Yes, I mean, I'm actually more excited when we get a client to go further than they expected. Most of our clients end up coming in at lead silver and we get them to lead gold or platinum. We recently got the convention center in Seattle all the way to lead platinum when they started out at silver. We're working on a convention center in Austin right now, 1.5 million square feet, and that's going to go for lead gold and ILFI zero carbon, which is all electric, 100% renewable energy, and all the things in there. And top to bottom, we work on every project towards those goals, those 3 goals that I mentioned.
Thank you very much. That's awesome. Going from gold to silver to platinum is not easy. So we appreciate it, particularly for a convention center. We like that. So, moving on, we will go to Christine. So Christine, you have spoken about how the 7th generation principle has influenced your thinking and your choices as an architect and a business leader, I should say. So can you talk a little bit about the context of that in the context of net zero? And is it directly or indirectly connected, related? And most importantly, how does it impact human health and well-being? Because I think we cannot lose sight of the fact when you are calculating carbon emissions and all, that human health and well-being is critical, particularly as we are coming in the second phase of COVID, the post phase of COVID.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Mahesh, for that tripart question. So it's a sensitive question. And just to bring everybody together here, the 7th generation principle is a multinational indigenous understanding of shared responsibility for our planet and the decisions we make. It means we're looking forward 7 generations, and we're also consulting backwards 7 generations to consider the decisions we make. And particularly as architects and developers, those decisions have incredible impact. So if you're looking to think, how does that relate to both net zero and health? Maybe we separate and start with net zero. Net zero, as we were discussing, is certainly about reducing our energy and our carbon impact. But it's also about reducing waste, reducing water, and consciously making choices that are positively impacting our planet. So if we consider the 7th generation principle as we make all of these designs, from the beginning of site selection through our design, schematics, construction, operations, at every turn, we will make a more responsive, more inclusive decision that will have an outcome that will serve both our clients and the community and the globe at whole. So one of the ways we might do that, for example, if you're looking long term, it's thinking about the durable materials, the longer life cycles, the more adaptable spaces, the way that a fit out might last and be interchangeable and adaptable for multiple uses. So that whether we're designing workspace, schools, hospitals, even as you're just mentioning in terms of residential or spaces where people spend time, which are all architectural environments and built environments, indoor and outdoor, how can we ensure that the decisions we make, the materials we select, will have a very, very long life that can be continuously adapted and can be ongoing? We can look back and say that was a good decision to use that material, to use it in that way, to use it in a way that was attached with mechanical fasteners instead of adhesives so that it had a new life right afterwards without any change and without any waste, so that we can essentialize and reduce how much material we use, so that we leave more, whether it's in the ground or in the forest or for others to use on their construction, or if we're actually looking at how those materials are being extracted, understanding that whole renewable process. So there's a lot more depth we can go into in terms of how net zero using a seventh generation principle affects all of the work we do. And as you bring it very importantly to human health and well-being, this is also very critically based within the seventh generation principle, in the sense that ultimately, as architects, we are designing places for people, places within which they can live their best lives, and places which we hope we're building in a way that is helping people to thrive without any toxins or materials that will be difficult to either recycle, reuse, or which truly we don't want to become part of us. Because the worlds that we design are molecularly allowing themselves to come into pieces slowly over time, and that becomes part of us. So we become our environment becomes us. So the environments we design, we want to be using the most natural, healthy materials. And to ensure that that flow of those materials also is ongoing, whether these are adaptable, breathable, helping people to move more freely, indoor and outdoor, so we can continue to evolve. So I guess as we are all sitting here looking and, and there's so much new building going on right now, and we want to continue, as was mentioned, to meet the highest credentials in terms of how those buildings are energy efficient, whether that's electrification or solar or others, and how those materials are used. What we really want to do is encourage people as we go through this process to take great care with every decision we make. And that's what we offer as a way to hold back, think quickly, but think about what is the impact of every decision we make, and how can these life-affirming strategies save money, save materials, save energy, save our health, and support the community. So thank you, Mahesh.
Thank you, Christian. That was very very inspirational. At this time, I'm going to put a plug for everybody to visit your office. I hope it's not a burden on you. I love your offices. After traveling the multiple places, visiting your Shanghai and Hong Kong office, and then eventually your India office, and now recently your New York office, which we'll come to a little bit later. I have to put a plug for everybody to visit your offices, because all the things that you just now explained, you're living it. We're thinking about these choices that you've made. So it's wonderful to have you in this call today, and sharing your experience. Now we'll shift the focus to Shivani Langer. So, from our friend from Austin. Shivani, you play a unique role. You are an architect and also a sustainability leader in Austin. The good news is your convention center is getting an upgrade. You just heard from Kajal. So they are going to go for, I think, recertification or up certification, including net zero carbon. That's an awesome property. So in a place like Austin, and of course, within the practice that you are in, how do you articulate the opportunity and create the sense of urgency at hand when you talk to projects that you want to transition to net zero design? And importantly, what are the biggest barriers that we must overcome to scaling to net zero?
Yeah, thank you, Mahesh, and honored to be here. Thanks so much for continuing this conversation for all the years that you've been involved in this, pushing this bar forward. So I truly appreciate you doing that, and glad that I could be part of the conversation here. I'll start with the barriers, and Jael, thank you so much for putting Texas and Austin in a good light. Yeah, you all are doing phenomenal. But I do want to mention that because being a global firm, which a lot of the panelists here are from larger firms that touch multiple different regions, one of the biggest barriers that we see, and I'm starting with barriers before I get to the opportunities piece of it, but we do deal with jurisdictions. We work even within Texas, right? We work with regions that are not very forefront in this regard, and we don't have jurisdictions that are requiring energy modeling. Mm-hmm. We don't have jurisdictions that are asking all buildings to be solar ready. Christine mentioned so nicely how these buildings are being designed for years to come. And if we are not taking those steps for these buildings, we're not getting them to be solar ready, we are not making sure that they are high performing by measuring. If we cannot improve what we cannot measure, and because jurisdictions don't require energy modeling, we are constantly having that fight with our teams and our clients to, hey, we need to measure, we need to do energy modeling so that we can truly ensure a high performance building. And that's the reason why Perkinson Will has created a very streamlined process of being able to do the modeling that Jael talked about as well, early stages, right, where the design decisions can be the most informed with our internal energy modeling, streamlining the process so we can inform every project and not just the handful of projects that are truly net zero projects. In those projects, there will be modeling done, but we are trying to cater to the maximum amount of square footage that a firm like ours touches. The other barriers we do see is such a huge need to have the right partners. We do have the perceptions in a lot of our regions, the perception of not, high first costs for high performing strategies, high maintenance required for certain high performing strategies that they are not familiar with. And if we don't have the right partners who can provide those life cycle cost analysis and can tell us that even though the first cost might be slightly more, you will be able to get the return on investment very quickly. We have to have the right partners who don't just exaggerate the costs because they are not familiar with it themselves. It is very important to not shy away from innovation. We need this in this industry. We need this messaging to come with innovation so that we can make the maximum impact. And now talking dual role, I'm lucky to be able to constantly serve in as an architect and a sustainability leader. And I truly think that being good at one makes me better at the other. So it is important to understand both sides of the equation. But on the same note, everyone cannot always be in the room when the decisions are getting made. Right. Sustainability leaders are there to support, but it is so important for every team member to have the right tools, to have the right guidelines, to be able to ask the right questions at the right time to help make the design decisions towards high performance, towards net zero. And having those internal tools and internal guidelines for every team member, educate them to make these big impacts is what will change this, what will impact all of our projects in a very large way.
Wow, I'm going to talk about that a little bit later with you if we have some time to talk about some tools and get your perspective on it. You're right, you have a unique perspective, but it also brings a unique challenge because you may not be in all the meetings, but you carry the responsibility of making sure everybody is informed. And how do you do that? That's always a challenge, particularly on a complex topic like sustainability, when you have so many projects that you are like a firm like yours is involved in. So that's not an easy thing to do. So, and we will do a little bit of summary at the end just to take some key takeaways that we got from you. Thank you, Shivani, for sharing that experience and perspective. Now, Marshall, back to you again. Obviously, your entire business is driven by a finance industry, right? Because you need financing and you also need to manage costs, particularly in this difficult climate. Nobody is going to share your cost with you, right, in your project. So you are carrying the burden of financing and also delivering a quality product. On top of it, you've made a commitment to give them a sustainable product. So a lot of things you've done. So what do you think are the biggest levers that industry can put in place to help businesses like yours not only compete, but drive transformation? I think transformation, just not sustainability, but just looking at spaces the things that you've done with your spaces, like the recent Hunters Point story, where you basically said, look, I'm going to eliminate the space for all these clubhouses and all, and I'm just going to make it simpler for them to have more space, because some of these families don't even have enough rooms, forget alone the community center that they want to be part of. So how do you make that affordable? How do you make that practical and drive transformation of spaces? Obviously, sustainability as its foundation.
Right now, Mahesh, that's the biggest challenge. In a high interest rate environment, as I mentioned previous, there are some local banks like Climate First Bank out of St. Pete is very good in this space. And the people have been great to work with. The challenge that we have is that, the vendors in our sector, in the solar panel, for example, and even the sun and battery, all of that is a prepaid expense. So all of that has to be paid before anything. So just due to the fact that these vendors go from month to month, it adds an additional burden. And what we've found is, most importantly, especially in our Florida market, is that you have to give them the complete picture, the complete story. Like, everything has to work. Like, the battery has to click on when the power goes out. And people experiencing that really appreciate it. The transformational part of the fact that, we're in a market, and a climate change environment, along with a governmental environment that's not supportive, makes it really a challenge on the developer, because there really is nowhere else to go. There's nowhere to go to say, I want a grant for this, or I'm having a zero carbon footprint or a negative carbon footprint to this home. So why not benefit from this? Like, in our world, and everybody that's on this conversations world, we should be getting a ton of attaboys and way to go. And how can we help you continue to bring this to market overall? And the challenge is that it's just, unfortunately, the consumer is appreciating it, but they also at the same time have very short-term memories. And that's a problem. We remind them over and over again, like, the air quality that you breathe is as important as your energy bill. And the fact that you have no energy bill is a huge advantage compared to where you would be if you live somewhere else. And we also tie in the resiliency factor, because the fact we survived 4 direct hits of hurricanes in the last 2 years, direct hits. And so, my answer, it's just torn between, there's really no one out there. There's no panacea solution except driving hard and trying to get people to appreciate something that once they live in it. And so we're able to take, narratives and interviews with homeowners that have survived the hurricanes, and the fact that, our community had not one insurance claim through 4 hurricanes, proves that, like, we're doing the right thing. But, how do we transform this to be a much bigger picture? How do we transform this to be, to enable everyone to be like this? My only solution, which we're doing now, is the rental community, which is the build to rent, which is a huge category now for home builders. As the market slows down, in the build to rent community, we're able, our plan is to have people rent homes that generate more power than they consume, to live in homes that have no VOC paint, but they can rent them without having the burden of purchasing. And I think, right now in the climate that we're in, we're really in a tough position, because, interest rates, even if they fall a half a point, they're not going to move the meter enough for people to come and jump into our world. But we need more exposure. So the more exposure we have, the more positive people. I tell people when they say to me, we're so happy in the home, the power went off and we didn't have, our power stayed on. I said, if you will tell 250 people, if one person tells 250 people, the word gets out. So it's really that, unfortunately, there's no magic wand here to say every home builder should be doing this, because then we'll start to, then the bar will be even. With the added costs that we put in the home, which have to be done, by the way. You can't live in a home that doesn't have power. You can't live in a home, that the rain's going to come through the wall, because in Florida, it's not traditional vertical rain. The last few hurricanes have been horizontal. And what happens is that's just a normal day-to-day thing we deal with. So I'd love to tell you that there is some, fantastic solution out there. it's just not there for us right now. And we know that people have the social conscience that this is the right thing to do. We just have to bring them across the finish line and get them to say, this is where I want to live, not compare, us with other homes. And so we're taking the move now to build single family homes outside of Hunters Point in areas that have been just totally devastated. And what that will do is, our first one is under construction now. What that will do will prove that you don't have to be in a specific community. You can build these homes anywhere. And
Right.
and I think that's a way for us to outreach and somehow prove to the market that you don't have to be living in a community. You can live in your existing home. And if you're going to rebuild it, why not rebuild it right?
Correct. Marshall, I still remember the last time you were real time sharing the pictures with me about the hurricane, and your property was above everything else. Like physically there was elevated. You elevated that so much. In contrast, everybody were under the water, and your property alone was not in water. I still distinctly remember that picture that you exchanged with me on a crisis management call that you were handling at that time. So
Yes.
I was so proud of the work you've done, because I think we often forget when the hurricane passes that such a picture existed. That is another problem that you have in terms of the short-term memory that people have. And second thing is the shift that you made is very interesting, which is that you moved from a person who is selling homes to renting homes. That's a huge burden you're undertaken on yourself, because you are carrying the financial risk, you are carrying the financial obligation, and also the capital that you have to bring now multiplies multifold, and that's not an easy trade. So thank you for that commitment and leadership. And I have seen how you engage with your community. When you are in the community, everybody is tracking you by your first name, and they are actually delivering their problems to you, straight to you, not through your customer service portal. So I've seen that in action. So you're a hands-on leader, and I know you have challenges, but if you're not going to overcome it, who's going to? So we wish you good luck.
Thank you. And Mahesh, one thing I want to add, I just yesterday had a meeting with the city of Bradenton, and they are doing everything they can to support us with some for either it's going to be a forgiven loan or it's going to be a TIF to allow us, because we're building a lot of workforce housing now in the city, to allow us to make the very first net zero workforce housing project. And so that's something that that these rents are controlled under a land use restriction agreement. So the rents are controlled, and that will allow people like your average nurse, your average fireman, these are the kind of people that we want to experience, in a multifamily environment. So that's coming for us, and that'll be starting in the next 3 months. And that's something we're going to be very proud of.
Absolutely, Marshall. Good luck. Thank you so much for continuing to push the conversation and the agenda. So, Jel, now since we are in this leadership team, with so many deadlines, 2030 and 2050 coming, please share with us some stories of how your firm is demonstrating leadership in the marketplace. How are you? You already talked about taking the Austin Convention Center to net zero carbon. Definitely that's leadership. But are there any examples, and are there any specific stories that you would like to relate at this point?
Yeah. It's great to be seen as leaders, and it's a huge opportunity and actually a lot of pressure. Our clients often describe our projects as generation-defining projects on their campuses and in their cities that impact millions and millions of people a year. So, for example, when we designed the new Seattle Aquarium that opened about a year ago, we designed it to be all electric, even in 2016, when that was a more novel thing to do. It's a warm water aquarium that uses water from the ocean, from the cold Elliott Bay. And so there's a lot of energy use in there, but we did the entire project with heat pumps instead of gas, which would have been the normal way to approach it. It's going for ILFI zero carbon certification as well. And millions of people will go through that every year and see that it's possible, even in this unusual prototype. So that's another generation defining building on the Seattle waterfront that is gorgeous and new. We've done those all over the place. We've got zero carbon projects in maybe 8 or 10 states. And so we just find the way through each set of regulations and find the way through our clients and the cost to be able to get there. One of the big things is apparently we're the largest firm to meet the 2030 challenge over the past 2 years. So our average energy use reduction across our average square feet is about 84%. So we share our success stories with us. We've been asked to share our success stories. So conferences, policy writing, et cetera. And so how we share our leadership is it's back and forth. We provide leadership on policy for embodied carbon and energy codes. And that actually helps us be better architects because the policy helps us get further towards net zero, but it also helps us understand the bigger pictures that we're dealing with on projects. So we have numerous projects across the country. We're working on a project that just opened at University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign, has a ground source heat pump for a business school. And the ground source heat pump may eventually tie the entire business school together for a zero carbon operation. Right now, it's just for the building that we are working on that just opened, the GS College of Business there. And that happens through working through, that's actually a P3 project. And it was working through the cost and making sure that the long-term value proposition for the university was met by a ground source heat pump. And then luckily they had available land nearby. But you need to find opportunistic ways on each project to get there. And many projects do have land nearby. If they don't, there's other strategies that we've used to get there. So in short, how we've gotten there is in 2013, we began early energy modeling on all projects. And so now we have the muscle memory to do that well on every project. We have the language as well. Over the last decade, we've worked on reasonable window to wall ratio. And we found that actually making opaque walls cool is the secret sauce there. A lot of architects, if you're an architect and you don't have original ideas, you end up with all glass. You just say, oh, let's just do a glass building and it'll be fine. But if you have some great ideas, you can design with mostly opaque walls and you get 30 or 40% glazing, and you can use texture and biophilic patterns, etc. So we know, and we've known, and I think most architects know, that a highly glazed building is not a sustainable building. That's just clear in every climate zone. There are numerous reasons involve comfort and mechanical sizing, passive survivability, and a lot of stuff. So we've been working on that as a firm. And then lastly, of course, the 100% renewable energy. That's the piece that gets you over the finish line. And over the last 3 years especially, we've seen our clients gravitate towards this as it becomes low cost, and even lower cost sometimes than just paying a power bill to use PV on the roof. So that's where we are. I could go on and on with examples, and we have a bunch of them on our website, of course, as well. And you know, the most frustrating thing about being an architect is I can't even talk about most of our great projects because NDA.
Understand. Whatever you can share, where do people go to see your case studies or information? What is the best way for them to kind of absorb all the information you've given, particularly our young architects?
Yeah. So our website has a bunch of information on it. And then we have also a research part of our website that has our Path to Zero Carbon series, 16 parts on how to get to carbon neutrality truly. And then we have case studies on embodied carbon and energy and all of the other stuff on our website. So go there, or you can just search and it'll come up in your search as well.
Thank you so much for sharing, Gerald, because I believe truly through the network, we want to encourage the habit of sharing also, because there are enough strategies out there for us to act on. So if you have the will, you can definitely find a pathway to make the progress like the way you mentioned. There is always an opportunity. So that is something we can unpack. Now we are almost, we are actually over time, but I'm just going to round it up with Christine and Shivani, a little bit of the fire round. So I'm going to give you 2 choices of questions, Christine. So, you know, to keep it simple, one to both, and you can pick the question that you want to answer. You don't need to answer both, but I leave it to you. So 2 things. One is that, you know, I am a big believer in meeting people where they are, because one thing we have seen in the last 15, 16 years is that if we come up with an ideal view of doing things, then we are not going to impact change at the level that we need. So we have to meet people always where they are, particularly when they're constrained by financials and other things that are beyond our control. So how do you meet people where they are? Because I've seen you do that all around the world with many projects. industrial projects to office projects to other community projects you've been part of. Or you can take the other question, which is to say that how is net zero a stepping stone for a regenerative world or a regenerative design? The pick is yours.
Well, honestly, thank you, Mahesh. They're both critical. I'll start just by responding to it in a holistic way. So, as an architect and director with M. Moser Associates, I can share that we encourage our clients and projects to really think about the future state of their project. So that means we're looking at what compliance elements there are today, of course, but it's really understanding what we know about what's going to be happening in the future so that can help to guide decisions that are made, can help them to guide in terms of how they're going to be saving energy, saving money, meeting incentives. And it also gives us a way to frame these best practices in a very tangible way so that it's truly related to the ROI, it's related to the impact, it's related to wherever they are on the process of becoming more sustainable or considering best practices or electrification. We can do a few assessments, and we've developed several. For existing buildings, we use an ADAPT protocol, and for campuses and industrial and larger scale, we use something that we call RAPID, which are restorative architectural protocols in design. What does this mean? It means looking at all of the potential elements that we need to make sure the building takes care of. Some that were just mentioned in terms of, whether it's typhoons or floods or lack of energy at a certain point, all of these elements, how can we help the building from the very, very beginning to consider solutions that will progress and serve them for many generations into the future in that building? And that is a process that is critical no matter where they are. And it ties in actually quite beautifully and folds into your second question about regenerative design, because these are regenerative design considerations. Regenerative design goes beyond net zero as a stepping stone because it's holistic. It's considering so many efforts because there are many, many ways that we can design and engineer solutions that meet one criteria extremely well. And if we can find ways that meet multiple criteria extremely well over time and into the future and through adaptability, then we've really led our clients into the best possible solutions. So that's one answer for you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for packing both the answers in such a short time. Sorry for the time compression here, but I wanted to at least get the perspective out so that people can reach out to you directly, because a lot of people are on the call. So I'm sure I'm sending a lot of traffic your way. So I hope it doesn't burden you. But I think people can reach out to you. Like always, you've been sharing a lot of experiences with others, and they can see firsthand how these topics can be applied on the ground, for lack of a better word.
Absolutely.
So thank you for that. Shivani, with you, same thing. I'll pack two questions for you there. I always intrigue 25 years in sustainability. So the definition, you've seen many definitions for sustainability, green building and everything, but we'll stay on regenerative design since that's kind of the topic we are in. How has this definition evolved? And the second one is that you touched on tools earlier. So what are your favorite tools? What's working? What's not working? What more we need to do? So we are all tools people, and I love tools because I was at USGBC. I was responsible for putting ARC and Perform and Edge and GRESB and all these tools, including all the things that we have done for LEED as well. So I love tools, and give us your perspective on how these things could help the team.
Great. I can touch on tools really quick and then answer the other one, but quickly. I know we are over time, but really what has been a driver for change and hoping that it continues to be a driver for change in Perkins & Will is we have a framework of design excellence called Living Design. And every project is, again, I'm all for reaching the maximum number of projects rather than one project that is flagship project, right? We are trying to change the paradigm. Has to be a paradigm shift across the portfolio, and that framework is the way for us to keep ourselves accountable every project team accountable, whether it is a new building or an existing building. Everything is required to be exceptional. Baseline is not the only thing that we want teams to do. And whether it's existing or new, every goal, the goals to meet the goals, they are all the same. We would rather have the team say inapplicable and the reason why, rather than remove certain goals from the framework because we think existing buildings cannot meet it. Let there be a way to achieve goals throughout the portfolio. And then we also have tools that say, what does good look like? Let it be tangible. Let it be very, easy to implement strategies on different kinds of scenarios that people have on different projects. So that's one. And then as far as regenerative design, yes, over the years, there was always this discussion about resource efficiency, which constantly has remained. It's still a fight, and we fight it, and we measure it, and we fight it more. But our Chief Sustainability Officer, Jason McLennan, is the author of Living Building Challenge. There is an incredible amount of conversation in our firm on regenerative design. The less harm is no more enough. It's absolutely not enough. And it's the healing process that we need to do for the environments that we build in is what we really want to cater to through regenerative design. And Christine said it perfectly, that it's not, green buildings can do so much. It's a nexus of goals, and I'm paraphrasing one of my teammates here, but it's a nexus of goals. We don't have to stop at carbon reduction. We don't have to stop at wellness. We don't have to stop at energy savings or water savings. We have to have a nexus of goals, which is what will lead us towards regeneration and towards healing rather than just less harm. And that's where the conversation is going.
Yeah, thank you so much, Shivani, for closing on that powerful note. Between Marshall starting it with staying the course, and you come back and actually closing it saying, let's maximize, let's not compromise on the goal. And everything that in between that we discuss is an inspiring thing. So I'm going to encourage the audience, with all your permission, to reach out to you directly, all of you, particularly the concepts like living design. People should hear, learn, and actually continuously innovate around it. I think one of the topics you touched on was innovation. And this is innovation, right? Learning about it, understanding it, and then see how you would apply to your own project specifically and your specific conditions. Because there is no one size fits all, although we all aspire for it. So I think sharing that was beautiful. So I am going to thank the panel so that before we shift to our second. So thank you, Marshall, Kajal, Shivani, and Christine for giving us a jump start. Now we move on to the next panel. That's going to be building upon the momentum that our first panelist built. Thank you again to our first panelists. So the second one is tackling barriers and building momentum, literally across sectors. So here, we will start with Umesh, another Texan whose home and work is in Texas. And we know that Texas faces a lot of climate challenges, particularly, unfortunately, with the recent heartbreaking tragedy as well. So it should be very difficult to make the case for sustainability or climate resilient design in a place where everything is generally dismissed as politics, particularly related to this topic, and not a business or a humanitarian perspective is taken into consideration. So Umesh, your views, how you are tackling it, and what's next on that front?
Yeah, absolutely. Can you hear me fine?
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to begin with. It's always great to talk to you, Mahesh.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I mean, you're absolutely right. Instead of getting caught in political discussions, there are pathways to actually advance climate resilient design. And I'm not going to get too technical as some of our other panelists. I'm actually going to talk about some things which are really, really basic, because sometimes you have to go back to basics. So firstly, I would start by saying, start by reframing the language or changing the conversation. And so start focusing on priorities and shared values. Instead of using terms like climate change, which can trigger political, resistance, start using language that can actually resonate across different ideologies, right? And so we are a regional firm. We are based in Texas. We do a lot of work in West Texas, and we also do a lot of school projects. So just using that as an example, if we actually start focusing on things like student health and well-being, their performance, energy savings, which could then translate into new teacher salaries for the district, then that becomes a really, really attractive proposition for the district. And of course, this model, I mean, needs to be changed depending on the building and the project type that you're looking at. Uh, but just start talking more about safety, durability, cost efficiency, and start using more like alternate terms such as future forward or future proof, because that's what we have noticed in our practice, at least, is these are really, really small things to change, is like just the way you talk to people, but these can have a significant effect on the overall conversation. Secondly, I would say, and this has been brought up previously by one of the panelists already, is architects can be really bad, and I'm sorry to say, but we do a really bad job at incorporating passive design features into our projects. And so, simple things like orienting your building correctly, using proper shading, using passive features like daylighting, these things do not come at an added cost, but they can provide significant benefits, not just to your clients, but to your building occupants as well. And so, secondly, I mean, using resilient building materials, which actually last much more than what your traditional materials might do. So, and this has been brought up as well previously, but looking at the overall life cycle cost of materials and your overall building design can be a great selling point as well. And then finally, I would say, start involving all the design team members early on, because if you start incorporating like nature-based solutions into your projects, those can actually help you manage your stormwater on site, but can actually also help you with other issues that we see here in Texas and pretty much the southern United States, is the heat island issues, right? And so it can actually help mitigate some of those issues as well. Thirdly, I would say, involve everyone, involve the community, involve the client. Start talking about what is personal to them. Like make it resonate with them as much as you can. And so talk about energy costs, talk about heat stress, talk about flooding. These are things that people are experiencing on a day-to-day basis. So the more you make it personal for them, the more that can actually help build trust. It can build resilience, but also relevance, right? And so I think that is something that has been helping us on our projects. Fourthly, I would say choose case studies. And again, I'm sure a lot of the panelists on the call today have amazing projects, and I'm so glad to be here in Austin. I'm waiting for the new convention center to open in a couple of years. That is going to be a great project. So thank you, Element, and everybody else who's working on that. But use case studies that resonate with people. Like, for example, I'm in Texas. We are one of the conservative states. We have a lot of climate skeptics as well, and so maybe choose case studies from places that are similar to Texas or similar to the places that you're building in, and show how resilience has been embraced in those places. Those can be really strong ways to communicate your story. And finally, I would say advocate through design excellence. As architects, as designers, we want each and every one of our projects to look beautiful. And that is really, really important, right? Sometimes that just kind of gets lost along the way. And so I want to stress the fact that, yes, we want our buildings to be resilient. We want our buildings to be future forward, but also let's make them beautiful along the way, because, that's the results are going to speak for themselves. If you have buildings that are going to save you on cost, that are going to stay cooler during hot months, that are going to use less energy, recover faster from disasters, while also looking great, then those kind of buildings are going to be compelling regardless of your political inclinations, right? And so we have all seen, that one building that has survived a storm or a natural disaster, and let's all, I would say, let's all strive to build more of those kind of buildings in the future. So I'll leave you with that.
Thank you so much, Umesh. Obviously we have to design for excellence, and of course, design is all about people generally relate design to beauty. So naturally, that convention has to be followed. But I do like the point you made about saying that let's make it relatable, let's make it personal, let's make it local. And let's also show case studies from the hard segments that where we have had significant wins. Because telling that Austin convention story will go a long way. Although Austin is a green central, but in Texas, it could relate. Texans could relate to that story better than a California story. That is something we have also advocated in the past decade. So I think I agree with you on that premise. So, now, we will go to our next panel member, Beth, a widely recognized leader at Stantec. Her work is phenomenal. Her title there is a senior principal and carbon and climate discipline leader. I don't think many people have that title, Beth, if I have to say. And you're also a leader in the ASHRAE, where you chair the Global Climate Change Committee and co-vice chair for the committee working on Standard 240p, evaluating greenhouse gas emissions in building design, construction, and operations. That's a very packed schedule that you are maintaining between project execution for your firm and then doing all this voluntary contribution that you're making to the society. So how will this 240p help us to move to a net zero emissions world at scale? I think that is what you're focusing on. And if you could just share with the audience your experience and perspectives and how they can use it, that'll be awesome.
Yeah, so it's a draft development. So our committee currently, it's a joint standard developed by ASHRAE and ICC. So regardless of which code your authority aligns with, this will be reflective of potential for greenhouse gas emission compliance. I'll say that the standard is intended to directly address the issue at hand. In the past 50 years, we've really focused on energy performance within building codes and standards. This is evolving to really address greenhouse gas emissions directly. And I think the real benefit of this potential standard as we start developing it and publishing it, hopefully by the end of this year, is that it will be available, it'll be repeatable, code enforceable, and a methodology for accounting whole life greenhouse gas emissions across the entire life of the building. So from construction, mining, actually materials, the whole life cycle. We all know what that is. Embodied carbon and operational emissions. The standard is not intended to be definitive compliance expectation other than the repeatable process and apples to apples comparison of performance. And it will be up to the authority having jurisdiction or the local region to set the standards of greenhouse gas emission for a certain design for compliance. This is only a standard for that repeatable, accounting and reporting process, which I think is the beauty of it. It allows the industry to really lean into the creativity of alternatives depending on the sector, the client, the cost, the region. There are multiple ways that we can design into net zero, and there is not a one size fits all. And so this standard really allows you to compare the alternatives and lean into this right solution for the right project in that market. So for us, those on the committee that are developing the standard and pushing for publication and hopefully adoption within your local regions, our hope is that it will help provide that guidance for comparison and demonstrating to the client that we are thinking long-term of their investment today for the future of their return on investment and long-term project success.
Yeah, thank you, Beth, for that background and introduction. I really like the idea that it is not meant to be compliance oriented, but it's more a framework, more a guideline, more something for people to use that as a what if tool, and then really comply to some definitive strategies are also part of it. It's not like it's vague, it's definitive enough for people to act on. I like that part.
Exactly.
Now, I know that you said it will be available probably end of the year or probably early next year. But if people want to get an early start and want to be learn about it or know more about it, how can they get access to it?
We intended to have, well, we did have another public review of the standard as it was drafted this summer, and we received a few more comments. So we're going through the draft one more time with our committee. Consensus-based standard, it's ANSI certified, so it follows the protocols that are aligned with that certification. We do need to have more consensus modifications, and then we'll probably push it out again for one more review. So just keep a lookout for ASHRAE and ICC's publications, or even my announcements of its availability for public review. That'll be another opportunity before it gets published.
I'm sorry. One more follow-up question on that, because it's such an important topic. The lot of multi-geography audience are on it, who are outside US are also on this particular chat. And then when we promote it, people will be hearing you. One question I had was, is this specific only to the United States, or people from any parts of the world can embrace the knowledge?
That is really a great question. We intentionally intended for this standard to be used internationally. We
Perfect.
will acknowledge that there are some data and references that are very North American centric, only in that is what was available to reference. We allow each authority having jurisdiction to modify the references for applicability in their local region, and that was the intention. We actually have an international community in this development of the standard, and we were very thoughtful about how does this apply to other regions and bringing in relevant information so that it can be useful globally.
That's perfect, because I think that is exactly what we need, and I can't wait for this to be released so that people get more specificity. One of the things I keep interacting with people is that, how do I do it? So I think this becomes your go-to guide for how to do it, or how to think about it, at least, to get started.
Exactly.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Beth. We'll circle back to you shortly. We'll move on to Gina. So Gina, last time when we had a call, you brought up a very interesting statement. You said, Mahesh, most of the people don't understand the difference between assessment, verification, and certification. And I know, obviously, you working in the certification field, that these three are three different things. And typically, people tend to think all of them as one. So I would love for the audience to hear from you. What is the difference? And then how would you outline the use case and value of GHG emissions verification? At the end of the day, we want people to go through the verification process.
Yeah. Hi, Resident Wonk here. I'm Gina McElraith, and I am Associate Director of Sustainability Assurance and Management Systems at 3R Sustainability and Sustainability Assurance Services. So I get to take all of these fun things that everybody does and works and designs, and then complete the assurance and verification of the work, which is a very key point. So to your point, Mahesh, there are some key differences. So a certification is a third party confirming that you meet their standards. So with the net zero certification, is they're certifying you that you're meeting the requirements of their standard, whereas verification is a third-party verification of a claim. So verifying that your greenhouse gas emission that you are reporting is accurate and can be understood and believed. And then assessment is a validation of your how you're meeting a benchmark standard. So there's examples of all three out there, but relating that back to the value of having a certification and being able to talk about that externally, and making sure you have a recognizable and valid certification, and having that standard is really key to having a third party review your information, verify independently that it is accurate and meet your needs. It also gives you a confidence in the work that you're doing. Oftentimes when I'm, completing a verification, sometimes we won't find anything and everything looks good, and sometimes we'll find some major issues. And it really is important to be able to have that extra that extra set of eyes, both internally and externally. And I'm really finding in as Umesh, you were talking about, the skepticism and a lot of the questions out there, that having that extra third party, whether it's a certification, verification, to be able to look at it, and you, whoever you are, collectively stating something, it makes a significant difference in overcoming some of the barriers or the questions about greenwashing or validity or things like that. So.
Perfect. So how do we, in your view, which one would be leveraged, particularly in the GHG verification phase? How do we make the case? Do you have any perspectives to share on that to the marketplace?
To the marketplace. So in the verification phase, it definitely is, well, one, there's regulatory requirements. So that even, that's coming up a lot now, particularly related to California, and some EU and several other countries. That's the first step. And that actually, regulatory isn't always, people come at it from a different angle, but it gives you an opportunity to demonstrate the value of it. But the value of a certification really is that, being able to demonstrate that you've met a specific set of standards. Oftentimes, it doesn't matter what the certification is or what the approach is. They'll say, aligned with, or in, but those always sound really good. But when you get somebody who knows what they're doing, which there's a lot of people now who know the details, know what to look for, they can recognize pretty quickly when you say aligned with as opposed to certified by, and that difference can be very significant when coming down to the either getting scrutinized or being able to make a business case to an external investor or customer or something like that.
Yeah, and I also think that it's important that it also helps you to have a internal review process that's robust, right? So which everybody speaks from the same language, at least they know the source of truth. So great. So thank you, Gina. So now we'll go to Heidi. Heidi, you are a senior design manager at City of Santa Monica. And you are literally making decisions that impact Santa Monica for generations to come. Earlier there was a discussion about making generational impact, and you are actually making it happen. So, last week, the city announced that it has achieved a stunning 54% reduction in carbon emissions since 1990, making obviously progress against its plan, which called for an 80% emissions reduction by 2030, which means that you have only 26% left to cover in the next 5 years. Most of the people would be crumbling on that target, but you are already well ahead of your target. So first, congratulations for putting that kind of momentum and being part of that story. And so please tell us, what would next 5 years be like? And most importantly, what is the confidence level that you have on hitting that 26%?
Right. Thanks, Mahesh, and thank you so much for your leadership and for bringing us all together on this really important topic today. And as you just highlighted, in Santa Monica, we've come a long way, but we still have a lot of really exciting work ahead to achieve our goals. So I'll just tell you about a couple projects that are ongoing and impactful right now. So one thing to note is we're going to City Council in September, which is in a few weeks now already, with our building performance standard ordinance. So that BPS policy, that's going to target energy use in our largest buildings and require energy efficiency upgrades to reduce energy use in the built environment. Because currently the carbon emissions from our existing buildings accounts for 35% of our total emissions. And as you probably all know, right, these requirements, they're different from, but also complement building codes, but these apply at specific dates and they're not tied to pulling a building permit, right? And they require building owners to progressively get to better performance over time. So these standards will really drive improvements across a broad range of our building types. So that's one big initiative we've got going on. Another really big focus is really continuing our electrification of our city fleet, incentivizing use of public transportation, which we're also electrifying. So I'm working right now on a lot of charging infrastructure at several of our city properties. We've got some in our fleet already, but we've got more coming. We've got Lightning trucks. We've got the Mach-E Mustang SUVs. We've got e-transit vans on order, and hopefully some street sweepers coming. We were hoping for some EPA funding, which is probably got a pin in it for a few years, but so they're a bit further out. But we, getting the infrastructure in place for all of this infrastructure. And a really exciting project that we have is also for our Big Blue buses. So we're switching out our fleet of 195 buses to be 100% zero emissions by 2030.
Wow.
We already have 20 electric buses in our fleet right now. And we have a 7-phase strategy for transitioning from renewable natural gas fleet to a zero emissions fleet. We have a request for bids that's out right now to construct a large canopy that's going to be equipped with basically overhead charging dispensers. So you can just kind of pull down wherever you need to plug the bus in, and it can fully charge one of our buses in about 4 hours. And we've designed that canopy for future photovoltaics. It won't go in this phase, but again, pending future grant funding, we'll be able to get some photovoltaics in that project as well. So there's a lot more happening, but those are some really great key examples of what we're up to.
Yeah, thank you, Heidi. Obviously we are compressed on time, so in the second round, I will take 2 questions together, and you can decide which question you want to answer. Same template will set. Now back to back to Umesh. Umesh, 2 questions for you, right? One is that your firm Park Hill recently became part of the SE 2050 Materials Pledge, and you're also a signatory of AI 2030 commitment. So how is this actually changing the practice of design responsibility within your firm in general? And most importantly, how is this actually helping your clients? And the second question is that, this whole GHG accounting, as much as we all love that topic, we must do it. It's a mundane topic. Clients don't get excited by it. Whenever I talk, what do you mean by I have to account for my carbon footprint, and I have to do this whole inventory exercise of knowing where my emissions are? So it's not such a lucrative topic. So how do you make your clients get excited about it, or is it not possible?
And you're saying I can pick and choose which one to answer?
Yes, choice is yours. We are a little bit compressed on time, so I'm trying to.
Well, I'll real quick. I'll try to answer both very quickly. First of all, making these commitments is us. It's a way to show that we are better stewards of the environment, right? And to us internally, it is very important to keep educating ourselves. It's really building a culture around sustainability within the firm. Because we can't really expect our clients to start acting responsibility unless we ourselves are doing it, right? And so that hopefully answers that first part of your question. Greenhouse gas accounting, you're right. It can come across as really overwhelming, and it did to us as well, because we recently completed our first ever firm-wide accounting, and it's a lot of steps, right? And so it can be overwhelming. That's understandable. And so, breaking it down into parts, typically we'll look at scopes 1, 2, and 3. So break it down into, maybe the clients then start looking at scope 1 the first year, and then maybe move on to scopes 2 in the next couple of years, and then have like a long-term vision of maybe getting to net zero by within the next 5 to 10 years or so. But to answer your question around how do you make it exciting for them, well, most clients are going to get excited when they know what's in it for them, right? So that's how you would want to talk to them, right? And so frame the value for your clients is what I would say. And so, besides cost savings, which we've already talked about, getting into these kind of operational measures, greenhouse gas accounting and such, obviously, benefits such as risk reduction, because the projects will be more resistant to climate events. A lot of that has been happening here in Texas, where we are, unfortunately. But this also becomes a really, really attractive thing for towards regulatory compliance. I mean, they may have greenhouse gas, they may have ESG compliance requirements, but then it's also attractive for insurance providers, right? That's another big whole discussion that we should probably be having around how to but it can also help build brand, build your reputation in the industry. investor confidence is another thing that comes to mind. But also you can get recognized as leaders within your peers, right? Because we all want to move forward together. And when they see that these guys are doing this, well, why aren't we doing it? And maybe that pushes them one step further, right? And so obviously a market differentiator. And finally, I would say, a lot of employees are actually getting attracted to organizations that have these kind of commitments. And so, it could be a huge driver for not just talent attraction, but talent retention as well. And that, as we all know, can be, again, a significant driver for a lot of our clients. And so a lot of employees are putting, increasingly putting values to these kind of things. Uh, and so that's what I would say is, those are the kind of benefits that I think we can talk about when we are talking to clients about these kind of commitments and taking on things like greenhouse gas accounting.
Thank you, Umesh. Beth, I have a interesting question for you. Earlier Kejal mentioned, and you know this as well, the fact that renewable energy is one of the game changers for our industry. And of course, we heard a lot about the heat pumps earlier, and I'm sure all these are factored into the 240p that you are drafting. But we also have too many barriers for deploying, particularly on-site renewable energy. So, when you did this 240p exercise, I'm sure based on all the perspectives you've heard, is there a magic bullet that we can grab and we can make some changes?
I think the market silver bullet is that creativity that's just so inherent in design. I had mentioned before that there are criteria for accounting and reporting, but there's no concrete measure that is going to fit every project in every region for every sector and client. I think the silver bullet is allowing for our creativity and the industry to come to the table with solutions that may not have been created yet. When we talk about renewable energy, a lot of people's minds automatically go to solar PV and maybe battery storage. Well, there are alternatives to battery storage. You could look at aquifer-based heat pumps. There are solutions that are out there depending on the specifics of the site. And I think that is the silver bullet, is having the freedom to discover and the opportunity to explore alternative solutions with the client and the design team and bring the comparisons back to the client to the table to say, what is the right solution for this specific case? And that is the magic. So I hope people just take away that there's no concrete silver bullet, that we need to really be open-minded in the solutions.
So it's in the making. Silver bullet is in the making. Thank you for that perspective, because I was curious, with all the convening you did somebody solve this problem yet? Looks like more work needs to be done and more opportunity exists.
Yeah. And again, it depends on the region. There are some solutions that have been verified as the right solution for that specific case or that specific area. But, if standards are going to be international, we need to look international, and every region has their own specifics in terms of criteria and opportunities and materials. And, every case is unique in that instance. So I think it's keeping that open mind as the silver bullet.
Thank you so much, Beth. That's very nice. Gina, this question comes to this is the next topic, difficult topic. Scope 3 emissions or embodied carbon. Pick one. I think for us, it's both. How are you tackling this in the, I would say, in this assessment, verification, validation world? I'll keep it a little bit broader. And then what's working and what's not working, and what else could we do? So your broad perspectives, because you see a lot of projects. That's why I ask you these interesting questions back to you.
Yeah. We'll talk scope 3, I think,
yes,
because that's where I live a little bit, might personally live a little bit more, but it applies to embodied carbon, I think, the same way. And that it really is hard to get started a lot of times because you kind of get analysis paralysis. You don't know what to do. So it is just really encouraging, and whether it's, on the assurance side or on the consulting side, of let's just start somewhere. Let's do one category. Scope 3, let's see what data is available. These are some examples of some things we're looking for, and just kind of getting down in the sandbox a little bit, and start, just taking it apart piece by piece. What do you think is, looking at all these categories, which was the ones that are applicable? Sometimes it's just rewarding to be able to say, 3 of these aren't applicable. Well, good, we did it. Like accomplishment. It's small check boxes. But thinking about where your impact is, you don't have to do all 15 categories. You don't have to get exact calculations. Appreciating and understanding that you're going to start with big assumptions, a lot of not accurate information as far as like using spend. There's nothing more frustrating than having spend data for your purchased goods and services, and then inflation goes up, and if you're using spend information to calculate emissions, the more you spend, the higher your emissions go. But that also can be very valuable because it is a way to show that the impacts of how you do your calculations and how you actually can use the data and have decision useful information. So even if that first time around, they're like, oh, that doesn't make sense. But then you can start, well, then let's get some, supplier specific information. Now we know why spend isn't as valuable. But it's a place to start. It shows us where we are. It shows us where our biggest impacts are. So now let's start digging into it. And then getting more accurate information, your emissions decrease, even though it's not a specific decrease, so to speak. It really is. It does help in the change management process, which is really what you're looking for in scope 3 emissions, is just starting somewhere. I will say the big challenge there, though, is analysis paralysis. Is especially when organizations are used to having very accurate information, having data that they, want to get into. You just have to sometimes simplify it out, and that's definitely the approach. And I'm sure Heidi or others here who have, started on processes. If you've been doing, inventories or reduction projects for a while, it isn't there definitely is no silver bullet on this one. So simplifying it, breaking it apart, getting started, going for one small piece, and eventually you can advance each of those. But that's the best way I know to start.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that aligns with what most of the practices should be. That is, start with what you know. Don't be afraid to make some initial mistakes, but get the concept going. Then obviously the fine tuning will happen as part of the process. So thank you for that thing. And with Heidi, we'll wrap up this round so that we can quickly go to the next panel. Heidi, the question to you, you can pick the answer that you want to give, is that you are a big advocate of portfolio approach for existing buildings, particularly with the 35% reduction target that you have, or at least the emission-related conversion that you talked about existing buildings. And then I always wonder when I hear such fascinating stories like Santa Monica, is that really truly replicable? Can we replicate this in other parts of the world, or even in the United States? So I leave it to you to how you want to respond.
Okay, thank you. I'll answer the one super quickly and then move to the next. I actually sit in a Living Building Challenge project, City Hall East. So if any of you are ever in Southern California, please reach out, and I'm very happy to give you a tour. We've got all the bells and whistles, composting toilets, rainwater to potable, all of it. So please reach out. Happy to give you a tour anytime. So I'll focus on, is Santa Monica a replicable story? Absolutely. At least that's our hope, Mahesh, right? The projects that we've done and continue to do are really aligned with our values. We see ourselves as leaders and can bring our population and community along and show them that it can be done. And we like to, implement really creative solutions and basically turn no's into yeses through, thoughtful approaches and doing the hard work. But to what some of the others have been saying, I think if you just set those ambitious yet realistic goals for yourself and continually measure them, and as Gina was just saying, like in bite-sizable chunks, and focus on what you can initially, and then continue to grow that. And tools like Global Network for Zero, which all of you know, right? That's focused on achieving net zero emissions, and those instruments and tools are so helpful for businesses and communities to get to meet those goals. I think also too, just stating the obvious, but having leadership on board is crucial. For us, it's important for City Council to continue to express priorities around fostering more climate resilient and sustainable communities. And their support really gives us a latitude to do great work and to lean into that. So we strive to do things the right way, even when it takes a bit of extra effort. And then, we have a sustainable building administrative instruction that went into effect in 2017, and that just establishes a really clear, high sustainable baseline for all of our municipal owned construction and landscape projects. It's in line with our sustainable city plan, and basically that just is a really great starting point when we're starting every single city project. And it just puts us on a great path, and it's very clear from the onset, so we don't have to have those conversations again each time we start a new project. We've got that policy quickly in place.
Thank you for that optimism. We share your optimism and enthusiasm, and it takes a little bit of extra effort. It's worth doing it. And I'm going to encourage everybody to come and see you at the City Hall, because I think not only for the building, they will learn a lot more about the city, and maybe some replicable strategies can be brought home. So thank you so much, Heidi. So, with the permission of the audience, sorry, this is such an interesting panel. We try to go as fast as we can, but we're a little bit over time. So for the third panel, that's even going to be challenging us further and sharing more insights, I asked for an extra time of 15 more minutes. If you guys can stick on to it till 1:30 EST time, I think we'll get through the discussion with this fantastic panel that includes Annika, Christy, and Marcus. Before we transition, thank you so much, Beth, Heidi, Gina, and Umesh for sharing such crisp perspectives and some actionable insights. Thank you very much. Annika, of course, I am seeing you after a very long time. It's almost 6-7 years now, but I follow your work. It's super impressive. And as a Showcase Global Sustainable Design Director, you wear many hats in your firm. You're not only leading your firm from within, but you're always pushing external stakeholders and partners on what's next in sustainable regenerative design. Now, what I would love to ask your question is that, you're seeing so many standards, you've done so much work. So what is the current state of building performance standards that you like, which you don't like, and how they are taking meaningful steps to address carbon and achieving a net zero future? And of course, you are big on embodied carbon construction in construction and design. So can you please also talk about that? Because these are topics that you have shown leadership around the world. And I think it will be worthwhile for this audience to hear it directly from you.
Sure, and I'll try to do that succinctly. But I would say, first of all, building performance standards, we're seeing in numerous states, counties, and cities, jurisdictions appropriately. And a lot of our cities and counties, 50 to 75% of carbon emissions come from the building stock. And you really fill that gap, the 98% of buildings that aren't going to be affected by building codes. They're very effective in the jurisdictions like DC and New York, who have already hit their first BEPS cycle closure or nearing it. The vast majority of buildings are able to hit those targets. So we are seeing that they are effective in pulling those buildings forward. There are others that are nearing their first cycle a little bit later. Some are they're based on things like EUI, energy use intensity, Energy Star, carbon intensity. Some are based on things like local median, and then they ratchet down, sort of competing with your peer buildings. Others are a trajectory approach where you know what the endpoint is, and then everyone has a different trajectory depending on your start point. They're all effective. I think the industry is trying to sort of get those different standards to come closer and closer together so the building industry knows what to anticipate across multiple jurisdictions. And ASHRAE is now trying to standardize as well with the 100P standard that there's currently a working committee trying to develop. So wildly effective. There have been some lawsuits in our current regulatory climate. So far, none have been successful at suppressing the building performance standard. They were all passed leveraging current and existing legislation and the sort of enabling tools within that legislation in their states. So far, there haven't been any legal barriers. we expect them to continue to go forward. Some are very aggressive, and that's very exciting to see. What I love about BEPS, when you mentioned embodied carbon, the greenest building is the one you don't build. And so it really triggers us to invest in our existing building stock, and we see some really exciting projects come out of it. So there aren't really ubiquitous building codes that address embodied carbon yet. We hope to see that. It's not currently embedded in our iCode suite. There are some localities that are adopting those codes, but BEPS is really a way to make sure that we've placed a value on our existing buildings and encouraged investment in them.
Yeah, actually, Anika, since we are on the topic, I always, given your source of knowledge and your wide experience, if people want to follow you, follow some of the good work that you have done or specific things that you would like to point them to, how would they reach or how would they access that information that you have been working on?
I can see in the chat people are posting links to the ASHRAE 100P, some information about that in the chat. So definitely follow those links. I'm on LinkedIn, so you're welcome to follow me on LinkedIn as well. And then IMT is a great organization that's helped coordinate a lot of the BEPS programs with those jurisdictions across the country. That's the Institute for Market Transformation. I can post a link to their page, but they're a great resource for seeing how folks are doing with the BEPS across the country. And the Building Energy Exchange is another nonprofit organization that's working with a lot of those jurisdictions to execute BEPS, coordinating with the experts that are on this call, on these panels, and in the audience in many of these jurisdictions who help to fulfill the decarbonization goals of those building decarbonization programs and performance standards. And so the Energy Exchange is a great community resource in all of the cities in which they exist. And so they have different websites based on the location, but they're another great resource, and I can post those links as well.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful because a lot of people from around the world are listening, so it helps them to kind of see the good work that's happening here in a broad way within the states and our organizations. Now, Christy, it's good to see you after a long time. At Branch Barton, being a practice lead there, you place an emphasis on operation and embodied carbon like everybody else, and have brought real passion to keeping both carbon sectors top of mind in your firm's sustainability consultancy and also to your external clients. Now, I have to I'm still remembering that impressive keynote that you did at last year's Rebuild conference. That presentation was awesome. So I would love for this audience to hear from you directly some of the key points that you made in that presentation, and hopefully we'll get a copy of that presentation and share it with this group a little bit later. But if you could just give us the elevator pitch from your presentation, that'll be awesome.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mahesh. I appreciate that. That's very kind. So overall, I think this work can get really technical and overcomplicated really fast. And really, the reality is if it's too complicated, people will not know where to start. So that's why I really advocate for simplifying the message and promoting a reduction first mindset. Like if we just have a reduction first mindset, everything can flow after that, right? And so when we start with that path towards a more comprehensive decarbonization strategy will begin to emerge. But really starting with that reduction first mindset is the huge takeaway that I hope came from that presentation. We need to reduce our emissions over a current status quo. Like that's our job, right? And so in that mindset, I always say some decarbonization is better than none at all. So let's simplify the message and clear the way for the stakeholders to reduce emissions in the built environment. Let's encourage evaluating decisions from a long-term mindset. The traditional path has always been to evaluate investments on a very quick return on investment, but these buildings are going to be around for like 60 plus years, we hope. That's how we hope and we build them. So it's very short-sighted to make decisions based on the first 5 years of that 60-year building life. So if we can flip the script a little bit, get this long-term mindset for investments and really start with that reduction first mindset, everything flows from there.
Yeah, that's awesome. If you don't mind, I don't know whether we had a copy of the presentation from Rebuild, or if you have it, if you could just share the link we will be, with your permission, will distribute it to this group and our broad network. So I would love for them to hear the perspectives. It's a different way of thinking about things. So these are important tools that we can deploy in our projects and work. Thank you so much, Christy, and good to see you again. Marcus, again, we met at the Green Rebuild Conference. It's a great place to connect. I think it's soon coming. Another Rebuild Conference is coming. So anybody interested, you should definitely participate. The team there does a good job. Particularly, Marcus, while we were there, you and I discussed about the laggards who have not invested in these guiding principles that we have been talking about. So what do you think is the key to unlocking those owners and buildings and bringing them into the field? Particularly, how do you move the people who are not taking any action? How do you make them act?
Yeah, it's a good question. And thank you for the invite. Excellent conversation, Mahesh, and happy to be a part of this. There's been amazing discussions about the tools that are available. There's a lot of technology and methodologies that are available here. And I think the key really to unlocking this is reducing risk for owners. We talk a lot about environmental impact and the language around that, scope 1, 2 emissions, decarbonization. A lot of owners and building operators of existing buildings aren't as familiar with that. And hopefully we can educate them more to become more familiar. But the kind of translation to that is understanding the risk to owners. It translates into a business conversation. If we can show them the dollars, phasing the work, and letting incentives that are available out there do some of the heavy lifting on easing that initial capital cost. But once owners are able to see that, and they're able to see their peers seeing the millions of dollars that they're able to avoid, whether it's from penalties from regulations, a lot of the regulations on the East Coast and West Coast that were discussed are happening, stranded assets because they didn't change that boiler, that chiller, what the impact of that is. But then also looking at the tools, the energy models that can help them understand and see those costs where there's immediate paybacks. So I think it's a big case of helping them perceive. I think the key is helping them perceive the risk and understand what that risk is if they're not moving forward with some of that. And then just showing them the dollars amount, whether it's energy model or showing that business case that validates that long-term impact from that initial investment, and then also easing the weight from whether it's incentives. But again, energy efficiency is consistent, whether there's incentives involved or there's regulations. If there's not incentives available, energy efficiency provides that ROI, and that speaks to the business case.
Thank you, Marcus. So, you've done such a good work in this space. You've been a road warrior, I should call you, in this one. So you've done a lot of good work. So I would encourage people to reach out to you to learn from you. I think you should share your contact details so that you're an excellent resource. You have different perspectives on doing things, and your skill set is needed in many places. So please do share your contacts so that people can be in touch with you and learn from you.
Thank you, Mahesh.
Thank you so much. So Anika, back to you. You are the HOK's warrior on Capitol Hill. That's everybody knows about that, and you're testified before congressional committees, and you're participating in building code formulation, green energy tools. You are also sitting in the lead committee, and so you are seeing the full spectrum of things that's happening currently today with between politics and policy and implementation. Now, how is the private sector dealing with the current landscape in Washington when it comes to their ESG and sustainability goals? And are they really playing the long game, knowing that they will have to be operational in the next 40, 50 years and have to survive this storm, if I may?
Sure. I think we're in Washington, we're handling it the same way my colleagues are in any location we're working. Our clients' goals haven't changed, and it's really nice. We had unprecedented federal investment in sustainability and green building over the last few years. Prior to the current administration, and that was fantastic. None of us would turn that down, but leadership's always happened at the local level. That's where policy's been consistently really aspirational and where we've seen the most movement. And our clients continue to work towards their own decarbonization goals, and they have not backed down. 2030 is too close. It's too close around the corner for anyone to lose steam. And so no one's changing. And the firms like mine who have committed to 2030, to the MEP 2040, SC 2050, none of us can afford to lose traction. So we're still going full steam ahead. And I'll just say this, we all have whiplash, I think, from going from that unprecedented level of investment to building decarbonization to where we are right now with I think an administration that is trying to undo all of that progress and almost in some cases do the opposite. And it must have been really successful. It must have been really effective. What we're doing must really have been working, or they wouldn't have felt threatened by it. The status quo wouldn't have felt so threatened by it. So keep at it. Keep what you're doing because it's working. What we're doing is really transforming the world. It's transforming the built environment. Otherwise, nobody would be paying any attention and they wouldn't be trying to undo it. So full steam ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. And have you seen the language shifting? Is there a need for us to, with the ESG in the backlash that we saw in this country, do you see clients changing their language, changing their shift? I understand their intentions and goals and implementation are not changed, but the messaging, language, any perspectives on that?
I think that it's always been the case that you adjust your language based on your audience and what they care about and what their goals are for any particular project. And certainly regionally, and I've talked to colleagues who are in different sectors. They might be in finance or real estate. When they are in the Midwest, they might speak about things differently than they do, on the West Coast versus on the East Coast versus overseas. And it's still the case. If I'm in Florida, I'm talking about, resilience more than I'm leaning on decarbonization because they see climate change happening around them every single day. So that's their priority. What can I invest in to impact my building and my site today, rather than like a longer range goal, perhaps, of decarbonization. So I think you always have to think about what words you use and what goals you position for the project and the outcomes based on the values and the things that the person across the table, the client or the stakeholders care about the most. We should always be doing that. That shouldn't be political. That should just be good business. That's how you get people to buy into to the effort that you're putting into a project.
Thank you, Annika. That's helpful. And I'm glad, I like the word you said, keep at it. So because it's working. And even if there is a temporary turbulence, we'll get past it. The goal 2030 is more important. So thank you for that. Christy, just now Annika touched on resiliency in Florida. You live in Florida, like Marshall. Marshall also talked about resilience while he was talking about decarbonization and investments. So how do you make the case for decarbonization and net zero resilience more as a business and a quality of life perspective, particularly your perspective as an architect and an implementer,
Yeah. It's a touchy topic here. It always has been, and in the last few years, it's gotten even more touchy. We definitely, I think, were one of the first states to move away from the word sustainability towards resilience. And that in part was because we've become, as a state, a case study for insurance companies leaving. We were one of the first states where many of our insurance companies left the state and left us in a kind of a position of having to pay much higher premiums, buildings having to pay much higher premiums, and insurance companies deal in risk, right? So they saw that there's a risk here with our extreme heat, hurricanes, sea level rise, you name it, we've got it for the most part. And they were not willing to take on that risk. But the thing is, resilience is what speaks to that risk, right? And so if a building can stay standing with all those extreme weather events, if it can be designed to stay standing for all those extreme weather events, then that risk starts to diminish. That plays very well with decarbonization because, like I said, we hope and plan for a 60-year lifespan of a building. And if that is cut short, we have to rebuild it. And that exacerbates the carbon emissions from both embodied carbon to just the transportation to get people here to build the buildings. When you have to rebuild before a building's life cycle is over, you're adding carbon emissions that, we're trying to reduce. And so I think the biggest thing that I see happening when we discuss resilience and we talk about these insurance companies leaving is
to me, there's an obvious gap between our building codes and the resilience needs in this state and probably lots of other states as well. And we have to find a way to close that gap in a way that promotes resilience and insurability, or else we're never going to get there. And so all of that ties into the ecosystem of decarbonization. If we can accomplish resilience, we accomplish decarbonization.
I love that. I really love that close. That's very nice. That's a good punchline. We should make a slide out of it and distribute. So you got good quotes, Christy. Thank you very much. Marcus, we'll wrap it up with you. Are there technologies and methodologies available to meet people where they are, particularly the buildings?
Yes, absolutely. It's a good question, and it's the answer is yes, and it's proven from digital twins. If anyone's familiar with the digital twins buildings, where you can look at a virtual model, you take your existing building and you build control points into it, just like a building automation system. You take those control points, you put it on your pumps, your fans, your occupancy sensors, and you put that into a digital model. And so that you're able to understand, what we get into is fault detection of your building, how real time, how it's functioning, being able to take that information, analyze it, and take action immediately to ensure your building is working as efficiently as possible. So couple that with AI technology, it's becoming very, very apparent that there's opportunity to maximize the efficiency of buildings. 29-30% savings on systems, and just by taking that and taking a closer look, being able to implement ECMs, energy conservation measures, and to optimize the controls that are there, whether it's looking at it from how it was expected to design and commissioning that on an ongoing basis, even daily, understanding changes in occupancy as that impacts the functionality of the systems. So those, and then also looking at data centers, getting to the PUE and being able to look at if there's equipment changes in a space, being able to adjust that in real time, or at least see that to then potentially make that adjustment. Those tools are already in place. So we don't really need to wait for future tech because a lot of these, between audits, digital twins, they have proven systems that are already delivering double-digit savings in buildings today. So the technology is certainly here, and then the tools are here. I think the challenge isn't technology; it's some of it is the financing and the willpower of the building owners to want to adopt it. It may cost a lot, but being able to have consultants that understand how to integrate it effectively, how to coach through that long term, because the other piece that hasn't been talked about a lot is that long-term operations. Those are the things that actually help you maintain the ROI that you're projecting in the beginning of the design. So maintaining that on the long term is critical, because if you have a payback that's envisioned in the beginning of the design and the construction, are you calibrating a model and then utilizing that energy model to ensure that ROI is being maintained 5 years, 10 years down the road? So certainly the technologies are there, methodologies are there. It's the expertise, whether it's in-house of an organization or adapting or finding that outside expertise to support that internal process. I think adds much value and can help ensure those amazing ideas, creative ideas in the design phase and into construction, but it has to be a follow through.
Yeah. Thank you, Marcus. I think we have particularly when we think about tools with now the advancement of AI and everything else, a lot of opportunities, right, to fast track all these things, right? Not only that these tools exist, but discovering those tools, using them properly, and then applying them for the right use case, and really using that to scale all the opportunities as well as diminish all the challenges is something that we can actually work on. That's something I know you hold very close to in your work stream. So please continue to share the wisdom with us, with the extended group, as you are coming across new tools. I think that'll be awesome. And then I would be remiss if I didn't tell about the podcast that you run. So I think there are a lot of people on this call should reach out to Marcus. He runs an excellent podcast. So I think many people on this call are potential candidates for a good podcast with you, Marcus, so that their voice can be heard around the world. So please help and support our leaders on the ground.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mahesh.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody, particularly Marcus, Annika, and Christy for really doing a rapid fire round while getting all your messages out. And thanks to our extended audience, because many people are actually signing in from other locations, other time zones. So pretty late for some people out there in the Asian side. But thanks to everybody who attended this call and this webinar today. Being a first webinar from our side, it is overwhelming success. And in my opinion, the conversation will continue. And our immediate conversation is going to happen during the New York Climate Week on September 24 at 12 p.m. EST, where we are going to go deeper. So we will be sharing the information on it. Please follow us on LinkedIn, follow us on website, talk to each other, continue to build a good story. And most importantly, let's continue to keep at it. I think this is very, very important. The good work that we are doing as a movement has to continue. And let's meet people where they are. So thank you so much. And please stay tuned, and we'll be distributing the recording of this to everybody so that you can promote it to your own internal audience. Thanks again.